Do you ever wonder what's really going on in government, locally, in the state of Tennessee, and across the country? I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson, and on Tennessee Today, we dive into the issues that shape our communities, from local policy to national debates. Each episode, I break down key topics and issues, share my perspective from over 20 years in the Tennessee legislature, and talk with guests about the decisions that impact your daily life. I hope you enjoy these honest conversations and that they help you stay informed and engaged. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Tennessee Today wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Hey folks, this is Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson with another episode. Actually, this is like episode 13, so I hope that's not foreboding of where we are. But this is episode 13 of Tennessee Today, and today I have a really special guest, partly because of his position in local government and partly because I've known him for a really, really long time, and that is Hamilton County Mayor Weston Wamp. Weston has a long history in Chattanooga, born and raised here, went to school here. Now, you went to college at the University of Tennessee, right?
Yeah, in Knoxville.
In Knoxville. And you got your degree in communications?
Communication studies is the major that Peyton Manning has now made famous.
Okay, yeah. Well, he's a great communicator. He also spent time on the Tennessee Board of Regents, which has given him a profound amount of knowledge around how higher education works and workforce development and how those two can be compatible or necessarily compatible with each other. So it's a pleasure to have you here on Tennessee Today and look forward to the conversation. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
By the way, what do you think about the hat? Pretty cool?
It's a nice hat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I thought so.
2026 looks weird. I feel like we just started 2025.
Yeah. Well, I got to get ready for the future.
All right.
Always planning for the future. So you were elected county mayor, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
No, see, it's been more than 3 years.
Okay.
That's why 2025 seems like it just started because I was elected in the fall, August. It was sworn in September 1st, 2022.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm losing track of time. Of course, I've had a birthday and I've gotten older, so that makes sense. All right. So you were elected. What did you do prior to becoming mayor of Hamilton County?
A lot of different things. I had the good fortune of coming back to Chattanooga about a year after graduating from UT and going to work for my day camp counselor as a kid. Alan Davis, who was one of the founders of Access America Transport, I didn't know him all that well, but he remembered me and I remembered him from when I was a little kid. And he and Ted Alling and Barry Large had started several successful companies and were beginning to think about what it would look like to be more civically engaged and to scale that entrepreneurial activity. And so even though I had grown up in a family that was felt most like architecture and politics, I got baptized by fire, started at 23 years old in a setting where there were several aggressive high-growth companies. And I learned quite a bit about business from some guys who are to this day are some of my closest friends. Worked there for a while, did some communications-related work, and then jumped over to the investment side and started a fund that is invested internationally, primarily in the logistics industry, which is where a lot of the activity of the companies I was affiliated with were in that industry that still is the high growth industry. It's a legacy industry in this community, but it's that also our high growth industry. I've always been fascinated by the country's fiscal challenges as a millennial. So I started this organization, a nonprofit called the Millennial Debt Foundation. It's now known as In the Black. And in the middle, made a lot of friends and some enemies running for Congress as just a wee lad. Some people think I'm young now in this office, but I would see you out on the campaign trail when I ran unsuccessfully for Congress and learned a whole lot in the process.
So tell me, because people, we hear a lot, those of us particularly in elected offices, we hear a lot about, if government ran more like a business, we wouldn't have problems, yada, yada, yada. Tell me, what skills did you develop on the private sector side that you think have served you well in the public space? And likewise, what things happen on the private sector side that you're like, that just isn't how government operates, and that's why we call it government and not business?
Yeah, it's actually a line that I use a lot, right? They are different things. And so we can gain lessons from business. There's a sense of urgency, I would argue, in the business sector that is good and can be emulated in government. There's different ways you can emulate that, but there's a natural bottom line that has to be met and a certain urgency that's set by whatever that is, whether it's a private ownership structure or public ownership structure in the private sector. And that's different. I mean, there also, I would say, is a certain type of public good that can be delivered from the government, but there's also a core set of services that are the reason that it exists in the first place. And so there's a lot of really wonderful people attracted to the government sector, but there's a different cadence and I would say a different sense of urgency. That's one of the things that has been distinguishing for me. I also think the government sector today, at least at an elected level, probably attracts fewer people than it used to from the private sector, which is maybe more commentary around the dysfunction of our body politic. I don't know that as many people want to enter this environment that you and I are in every day,
Right, yeah.
like they used to. But I think there's lessons to be learned. One that is certainly pronounced from a position like yours at the state or putting together local budgets like we do. In the private sector, you just freely cut things that aren't working, or you cut out of necessity, and 3 people's job becomes 2 people's job out of necessity. And if those 2 people don't want to do that work, then they can quit and go find another job. There's just some realities that hit a little harder in the private sector. Whereas in the public sector, I can tell there's at the point that you've created a new government job, good luck getting rid of it. At the point that you've created a new government program or service, even if it's something small in local government, it's one of the reasons that we've tried to emphasize pilots and just being candid that we're going to try something, but if it doesn't go well, we need to set the expectation on the front end that we're going to end it, because I think that's a fundamental difference, right? Companies try stuff all the time, admit that it's not working and cut it off, and the employment attached to it may be cut off. Whereas in government, it seems that the status quo just kind of grows even over the course of our country's history. The role of government seems to have either maintained or grown.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting between the private sector and the public sector. One of the difference that I've noticed is the way in government, power is diffused amongst different branches. Like even for you, you've got a commission you've got to deal with, and you can't make a decision in most cases without some kind of consent. Whereas if you're the CEO of a company, you're hired by the board, but they give you the autonomy to run the company the way you want to run the company. And if you're not running it the way they like, then they get rid of you. Well, you actually, in the executive branch in government, actually responds to 2 people. You've got the board of directors, so to speak, the county commission, and then you've got the public, both of them evaluating you on your potential job performance. So I think decision-making gets really harder in government because of that. And it also, you get these pet projects that everybody has that they want to protect, and it makes it very difficult. Even though the public is demanding that we reduce spending, and the only way to reduce spending perhaps is to make changes in certain programs, it gets very, very difficult to do that. And I think Reagan was the one that said, death and taxes and, oh, by the way, a government program are the only things that are for sure in life, right? Yeah. So, okay, so you go in the private sector, you work, and then you run for county mayor. What kind of motivated you to run for county mayor? I remember when you decided to do that, and I was like, oh, that's going to be interesting. He'll be really good.
For the people who watch your podcast, I'll tell a story I've never told publicly. I'd never thought about running.
Yeah, pay attention, everyone.
I'd never thought about
exclusive.
Yeah. Well, it's probably my most candid answer to amongst friends, because I've been asked that a lot from the time I decided to run. The idea came to me because Jim Coppinger, my predecessor, asked me many, many years ago, after I pretty narrowly lost to Chuck Fleischman in 2014, maybe a year or 2 later. Shelby and I had started a family, and I didn't think I'd run for office for a while, and I didn't end up running for office for a while. But Mayor Coppinger asked me, have you ever thought about running for county mayor? And I said to him, no. And he said something that always stuck with me, and I think this is arguably true, but I remember him telling me that it is a young man's job, and that he wouldn't do it forever, and that I ought to think about doing it. And candidly, I had never thought about running for county mayor before then. In the years that followed, I mean, that's several years before he decided not to run again, but in the several years that followed, I became very fascinated with public education, strengths and weaknesses in our community, and some of the traditions that are unusual here, schools that have gone away, new ones that have started, all of this amid a deep, enduring tradition of private education in our community. And so, as Shelby and I kept having kids and envisioned ourselves sending them to public elementary school like I went to in Hickson, I thought that there was a role, given the unique nature of local governance in Tennessee, for a county mayor to be involved in public education in a productive way. And so those were those were the origins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and and you and I have talked about this a lot, both between us and publicly as well. The relationship between the state government and the county government. I just spoke earlier to the Chattanooga area chamber, and I told them the same thing of that local government is state government at the local level, right? All the things that we do, you inevitably have to do, whereas city government doesn't have to do that. They can pick and choose, by all intents and purposes, they can pick and choose what they want to do. So education has been obviously your focus. You were on the Board of Regents, which has responsibility to higher education, parts of higher education in Tennessee. When you were elected and you came into office, what was the one thing that kind of surprised you about the position that you didn't anticipate?
About my position?
About your position as county mayor. What was the thing that?
Well, I had virtually no familiarity with county government. I'd grown up in a political family, so I probably assumed that I knew more about politics than I did. But my father only ever served in federal office, and so I had a rudimentary, at best, understanding of how a county mayor would work with a county commission. And, they sort of famously got mad at me about a few things right off the bat, and I totally understand why. But even at the time, I was explaining to them, y'all are going to have to help me understand your expectations, because the previous county mayor, Coppinger, wasn't only somebody who'd done the job for a long time. He was a county commissioner, elevated among his peers with a vacancy as the county mayor. He was appointed the county mayor. So he understood the position from the perspective of a county commissioner better than anybody ever had. And I understood it, obviously, way less than anybody ever had coming in from the outside. So that's the big one, is how do you work to, identify, the support necessary to drive a big agenda, right? I mean, we're tasked with running the day-to-day operations of county government, but to your point, to do big things, to spend the county's resources, requires a majority of the county commission. Yeah,
so we're in an age where everybody talks about leadership, right? I mean, if you go to the bookstore now, if there still is a bookstore, if you go to one, McKay's bookstore, if you go to a bookstore now, you'll find a whole aisle of books written on leadership. And most of that is written towards executive leadership, and most of that's written towards executive leadership in the private sector. Executive leadership and tell me if I'm accurate on this, executive leadership in the government space is really different, because you have to, all those people, those 11 members on the county commission, they all view themselves as leaders too, leaders within their own district.
Right.
Leaders within that body, and legislative leadership, the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch, is just completely different kind of leadership. And I don't know if you discovered that when you kind of came in. That's kind of what I'm drawing from your answer is, hey, I had to realize I got to figure out how this all works with these people.
Yeah, well, and part of even understanding how you can help them is you got to understand how county government works, what it can and can't do. And then you've got different types of personalities who find their way into executive positions and into legislative positions. I actually learned the most about politics. The person who I have always emulated, if I was to point to one single person, was Dr. Tom Coburn from Oklahoma, who I looked at in a lot of ways as a mentor. So even my own personal style, whether you love it or hate it, is in a lot of ways inspired by Dr. Coburn, who was a legislator, not an executive, and I've thought a lot about that because I've had to be creative in thinking through, well, how would Dr. Coburn, extremely principled guy, how would he only served at a federal level. So I'm also kind of downshifting into local government. But then additionally, he had been a business executive and a physician, but how would his style of leadership convert to executive leadership. And then, I think about the 11 personalities on our county commission. We've all got our strengths and weaknesses, and it's a partisan form of government, like the legislature, but a softer form of partisanship, because there's 11 of them. They see each other all the time, and the traditions of the county. I think the Democrats were savvy with this one. I think the traditions were kind of beginning when they lost their grip on a majority in the county. Is they want everything to be nonpartisan, as the grip loosened. Yeah. Well, we're all friends here. It's not really about partisan politics.
Bipartisan. It all needs to be bipartisan.
It's got to be bipartisan now.
And
now that it's, we've got our own Republican supermajority of sorts. You don't talk about it that way in local government, but it is a reflection of the county, a Republican supermajority. I think the people, when they vote, do expect that to be a partisan.
It is. It
issue.
is interesting, and we'll talk on this in just a minute, because I think it's a big challenge for us locally as well as in the state. But people who move here don't realize this used to be, a Democrat state.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Even as early as the 90s, we were still a Democrat state. And
that's part of my coming of age, just as in politics, but my life experience. My dad ran against our longtime incumbent Democrat congresswoman, lost to her. She ended up retiring, and then he won. And so the context of our family's involvement in politics is this county going from a Democratic county in many respects to a Republican county. Interesting fact about Hamilton County history is, even though particularly local government was dominated by Democrats, and a lot of Democrats, prominent ones, served in the legislature, Hamilton County always has supported Republicans in presidential races, with only a couple exceptions historically.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And that has more to do, I think, with the county rural portion of it than, the city proper, which we still see today. I mean, the divide between almost the same as America, right? I mean, you look at the American, you got the coastal folks in the large metropolitan areas that are typically in the blue side, and then you get into the core and the smaller, but you're like, well, they're all red. It's an interesting dichotomy that we have. Okay, so your emphasis has been education. At least that's been one of your emphasis. I contend that you've kind of brought a new level of sophistication to county government. For a long time, county governments didn't really engage themselves in the economic and community development of an area. That was kind of left to the municipalities, right? Because everybody figured the urban area, everybody's going to move to the urban area, and the rural areas just weren't that involved. And so county governments historically have not been involved as much in economic and community development. But that has shifted a lot in the past 20 years, 25 years, and particularly members who are now your age, that they see the role of county government much greater. How much work do you do on the economic and community development side of the equation? And how does working with federal and state partners, how does that all work?
Well, we do a lot of work. I mean, this is one of the days where, and one of the exciting things about the job is every day is different. But this is one of the days where there's a lot of our emphasis has been on economic development issues. I'll take a step back to what you said earlier. You helped me understand county government, I think, appropriately as a subdivision of the state of Tennessee. We are effectively the state of Tennessee delivering services at a local level. I find that to be really empowering in a lot of ways. Some people would say it's kind of limiting because we only have powers given to us by the legislature, but I'm not adversarial with the state of Tennessee.
I like the fact that you said power given to you by the legislature, not the governor. I appreciate that because we like to remind the governor periodically that, you propose stuff, but ultimately, as I'm sure your county commission would like to remind you periodically. You make suggestions.
Here's another interesting thing. I mean, we work much more closely with our legislators, even as in the executive branch of local government, we work more closely with our legislators than we do, the executive branch. In many cases, if I need to get to somebody in the executive branch in Nashville, a lot of times you're my quickest way of getting there. But so my answer to this question about economic development and the changing role of county government really stems from trying to own the way you described this, that we are the representation in some ways of the state of Tennessee here in local government. It's the fourth largest subdivision. Many of us would argue it's the best subdivision in the state of Tennessee, which a lot of us would argue is the greatest state in the union. Well, that's a pretty cool way to describe the opportunity that I've been given or what the responsibilities of county government are. It's also a misunderstanding that a lot of people have that county government serves only the people in the rural parts of the county, right? Everybody's a county resident. If you own a home or even indirectly if you rent, you're paying county property taxes. And the reason for that is that we are the subdivision of the state of Tennessee. You can supersede our authority and create a municipality, and it comes with a lot of different responsibilities. But we have roles that are different than that, right? And one of them is in public health, one of them is in public education, certain responsibilities that statutorily counties have to carry out. And so we're always thinking, and this may be a little different than the traditions, we're thinking equally about the 386,000 residents of Hamilton County. Now, we have a different public works responsibility to the maybe 125,000 who live in the unincorporated areas. But in almost every other category, again, whether it's economic development, public health, and ambulance service, we're serving everybody. And we're thinking often about how those different interests come together. And one of the realities about counties taking a back seat, if they continue to do so relative to a municipality, is that the politics are more divergent than they've ever been. And this is something that doesn't have to be divisive. It can just be a reality that we're working within. Mayor Kelly and I, we speak often about the reality that the county, or even just the non-Chattanooga parts of the county, are more conservative than they've been. The city of Chattanooga is going to quite obviously more liberal than it has been politically. And you can see this probably in this most simple form through presidential election results. But if counties just do as their largest municipality does, then the taxpayers of that county are effectively misrepresented by the politics of the city. And so I think in a very healthy way, the city of Chattanooga can choose to do some things based on the majority and the political will of that community. And then we can represent more broadly the interest of the county as a whole. And that does most clearly play out, I think, in economic development, where we're just a little cagier, a little more stingy with tax dollars. We've got a different standard that needs to be met. We've got a greater appetite to make cuts and ward off tax increases. But if you're going to avoid tax increases and you're going to be careful with every dollar, part of that equation is you got to be even more cautious about the abatement of taxes, right? Economic development a lot of times includes, especially in competitive states like Tennessee, it includes some type of favored treatment in terms of taxation, and you can't have. It's very hard to have your cake and eat it too. As we're all told growing up. And an example of that in economic development is you can't maintain one of the lowest tax rates of competitive communities in the country, and then also freely give away tax abatement.
Yeah. So let's you've gone down a really good path here for me. Let's talk about economic development and growth and development, because across the state of Tennessee, we are really wrestling with the growth that we're experiencing. And Hamilton County is no different, right? So we're seeing a lot of new people come into the area. How do we, from your vantage point where you sit, how do we balance that growth and development with not losing touch with who we are from either a cultural or heritage perspective? And the analogy or the example I would give to you, so y'all floated and passed, a Plan Hamilton, which was designed to try and help put in place at least some planning of how we would grow. How do you think locally we wrestle with this? And because it's always been said, or I've heard of the old proverb that from municipalities' perspective particularly, but I think it'd be true for a county as well. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? If your population's not growing, if your income levels aren't growing, then in the world of economic and community development, you're dying. How do we balance that? Because I think the public, and particularly those that are legacy people here, that have lived here all their life, they see Hamilton County changing. How are y'all managing that?
Well, one quick clarification. Plan Hamilton started out as a proposal initiated at a staff level. So we would have claimed responsibility for the first version of Plan Hamilton. One of the things that's confusing is that Plan Hamilton changed radically but maintained the same name. And so basically we don't, at least kind of my office, my staff, we don't take credit for the Plan Hamilton that passed because it was
or blame.
That's right. Or blame. I mean, it is such a dramatically amended version of what we had proposed, that it is seen by some not as an improvement, but if anything, as if it codified the type of irresponsible growth that's got us to where we are. Well, I think the first part of this conversation is about expectations. I think we have to, as a community, at least talk about some of our challenges, many of which we inherited geographically. Because this is a community where growth is tough and has been tough for some time. The reason the ridge cut is difficult is because it cuts through a ridge, right? It's one of the reasons that traffic throughout my lifetime has been tough going east and west. It's not any single person's fault. It's not the state of Tennessee's fault, but the geography makes it difficult. The county is bisected by a river. In the southern part of the county, there's very little flat land until you get out east. As you go north, as we've even learned, all the way to the north end of the county, McDonald Farm is not a flat farm, right? It's rolling hills. So there's a lot of topography, and that presents challenges from a residential development standpoint. And so I think a high-level view of what's happened here as people have sought suburban living and the quality public schools, which are largely outside the city of Chattanooga, they're out in the county, is that development went to where it penciled out for home builders. I think it's more a statement of fact than opinion. And so the most realistic place, and there was a boom, an economic development boom at Enterprise South that aligned with this. Ooltewah, the farms of Ooltewah and Appleton are developed residentially without adequate infrastructure at a certain point. We're certainly past that breaking point. Almost everybody out there is frustrated by the amount of traffic. In some cases, schools are at or above capacity. The interesting fact there that more schools in our community are at or under capacity than are over. But some of these things, the feeling of growth is more significant than the reality of growth, other than an outsized year or two after COVID, where we certainly imported some Californians and New Yorkers. We're about a 1% growth city in terms of the city of Chattanooga, and a little more than 1% as a county. So we're not a really high growth community, but we've got such constrictions, many of which, again, are geographic constraints, that it feels like more growth. So I think the approach is you balance it the best you can by focusing on density where it works. And in the city of Chattanooga has made significant moves in the direction of density. They have the infrastructure, both road and sewer infrastructure, to build that out. And then we take a more nuanced path to growth in the outerlying parts of the county. And then the outerlying parts of the county can't be talked about as a monolith. It's not one rural Hamilton County. These are all communities with their own traditions, their own appetite or opposition for growth. And so you honor the legacy of those communities. You go talk to Bill Hollander about Appleton, Tennessee, and you realize there's a great history there. And his family is a part of a lot of that history. You go to Harrison. Harrison can be lumped in as unincorporated Hamilton County, or you can understand it as the county seat of Hamilton County for a long time, and therefore the place where they battled to start James County. There's a long history in each of these parts of the community. The county started in Sale Creek, right? Another unique community. I would say the resistance to growth in the north part of this county is not nearly as significant as it is in the east part of the county. So you weigh those things. Where is there an openness to growth? 27 running from downtown straight north, great infrastructure, seems to be long-term, an opportunity to develop further up there. Hunter Road, Snow Hill Road, the infrastructure challenges and now the waning amount of sewer capacity in the east part of the county mean that it's time to pump the brakes.
Yeah. I think, you hit on a really good point about growth. If you look at the county overall, it's growing at 1%. But if you go to a specific area, they're like, well, it may be growing 1% across the county, but in my neighborhood or where I live, it feels like it's growing.
Well, and in Ooltewah, this is very true.
Yeah. And it is true. It's and we have the same challenge at the state level too of, how do you get your infrastructure in place ahead of the curve? You have to have the tax base to support the infrastructure. So it's a real challenge for everyone. It is nice that we've created a place that people want to live, and now more people want to stay. I mean, that's very positive, but it is creating some real challenges for us all across the state. Well, while we're on growth and development, obviously, and you brought up McDonald Farm, and we've begun to have a community discussion. Actually, and I'm sure you're getting I'm getting some great feedback on the proposal about, do we do some kind of land use swap between the park that's over at Enterprise South and what we do at McDonald Farm. And to some degree, that narrative has gotten disjointed, because before we were really ready, or before there was a really prepared to have a really good, robust community discussion about it, it sort of got out. So I had to kind of speak early on it. Can you give the listeners some idea what's the thinking behind the idea of doing a land use swap? And again, I think we're getting great community feedback on it, which is ultimately what we would do anyway. But how did this come about? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of it comes out of the conversations that have been ongoing for years about a balanced approach to growth, growing where it makes sense versus maintaining more of a rural quality of life in parts of the county where that's both desired, but it's also more financially practical. Enterprise South is one of the great industrial parks in the South. It's changed the economy of the Tennessee Valley. There's a larger than people realize tract of land that is deed restricted for recreation. A lot of that land is not programmed for recreation. So there's a 2,000 acre park that the county runs out there. It's got trails all in it. There's a lot of land on the periphery of it, particularly some land along I-75. Some of it's fill dirt from the creation of the interstate. It's not particularly special land that we have entertained. And just as a concept, we have proposed that you could swap deed restrictions under an existing federal program in a way that would allow us to preserve McDonald Farm. Our desire up there would be to create, in that pristine environment, another large, nearly 2,000 acre park. So the north and south part of the counties would have really iconic 2,000 acre parks. And then that conversation to some extent got tilted sideways by people who were fearful that there would be greater disruption to the nature park than we've ever considered. I think there also is an intimation that this was further down the line than it is. It's merely a concept. It's still hard for us to answer a lot of people's specific questions because we weren't ready to talk about this when the newspaper forced us into talking about a plan that we've worked diligently on, but still requires further development. A couple things, though, that are probably worth pointing out. One of the core reasons for pursuing this is that 30 miles north of downtown Chattanooga at McDonald Farm, where there's virtually no infrastructure in place today, the cost of developing that site for the purposes of economic development is in excess of $300 million. It's a staggering number. To put it in context, the reserves, the rainy day fund of the city and county, Chattanooga and Hamilton County combined, are not enough to redevelop that site into an industrial park. Whereas if you could long-term lift deed restrictions on unused portions of Enterprise South Nature Park, you've got everything: interstate, rail, sewer, water, gas. All of those are in place. So it becomes a proposal not only to use land in a smart way, net conservation effort of more than 1,000 acres. The community would gain over 1,000 park acres, but it also is no exaggeration to say that it would save a couple $100 million. What I have noticed now that's a little concerning is when I started really paying attention to your service, my dad's service, 2007, 2008, 2009, I was a college student. Jobs were all that really mattered if you're an elected official. That's kind of my memory of what you guys were focused on. And today, everybody's got a job. And that's an overstatement, but it is
we're at record unemployment across the state, but in this community on year over year. I mean, it's been amazing. Yeah.
And so I just think right now we're in one of these periods of time where we really should train ourselves to remember it's not always going to be like this. What do we need to be doing today that's in the best interest of our kids 10, 20 years from now in an unknown set of economic circumstances?
So let me ask you, And then we'll move on. But I think one of the things I think that are going to have to be addressed as we talk about this out into the future, however long that lasts, is why does it have to be an or? Why can't, people who email me have said, why can't we have the park at Enterprise South and something at McDonald Farm? Why do we have to repurpose the land at Enterprise South? Let's add, instead of an additional 1,000 acres, let's make it 1,500 acres because we're going to keep the Enterprise South and we're going to add McDonald Farm as well. Why does there have to be that or instead of just we're going to do them both?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we can't recreate the infrastructure environment at Enterprise South. There's only so much land there. Most of it is either Volkswagens or they have an option on it. And it is an extraordinarily expensive amount of infrastructure that's already in place there. Now, I would argue the concept we've laid out that really, again, is not yet to the point of a formal proposal. The concept does give us both a huge park at the north end of the county and it maintains all of the current recreational opportunities of the park, on the south, kind of southeast part of the county. Technically speaking, we could start to turn every last piece of property in the county into a park. Theoretically, we could do that. I don't think that is in the best interest of giving leaders, and really in this case, future leaders, the flexibility they may need to make decisions that are best for our community, right? And an example there, just even, you don't have to get creative to think about this one. The current Volkswagen footprint employs about 900 people fewer than it did a couple years ago, right? And some of that is the UAW, maybe more than it is a result of automation. But to assume that everything we have now, we will always have, is wrong, and we need more flexibility. And it may be at the end of of this discussion that those opportunities aren't going to be at Enterprise South in a portion of the old Volunteer Army ammunitions plant that is now deed restricted for park use. It may not be that it's over there, but it's also not going to be on Combustion Engineering's old site. And one interesting criticism that we've heard is, once it goes manufacturing, then it'll never go back. And that's actually exactly wrong based on the history of Volunteer Army and ammunition and it becoming a park. And you could argue the same thing, at the sculpture fields, or you could argue the same thing over at any of the sites that are now being repurposed for multi-use. And so, again, part of our desire here is to think long-term. I was asked earlier today about pads and very specific questions about subdividing. We have no plans around that. The concept that we've laid out is simply a lifting of deed restrictions. You lift the deed restrictions, every tree remains in place. This is just about flexibility for future generations. There is no, and I guess this is disappointing to some people, there is no conspiracy here, right? There is no entity that we're trying to put on a specific size pad, adjacent I-75.
Yeah. And this will maybe surprise you, but I think, and I think you'll agree with me. We actually, as elected people, we actually appreciate the feedback that the public gives us. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if it's not positive, even if it's critical, we learn from that feedback. I know, reading the comments that people have written or the emails that people have, that helps us shape our thinking around how we move forward on projects like this and other projects in the future.
Yeah.
Community engagement is essential.
I'm actually, I agree with that totally. I enjoy the feedback, particularly if you're nicer, if you start your remarks about the land swap by calling me a Nepo baby or whatever, it doesn't quite warm up the conversation.
Not quite the same feel, but I get it.
But I had a woman the other day who messaged me. She'd posted something that was quite mean-spirited, and I responded to her and just asked a question in response, and she couldn't believe that I had responded. To which I thought, what do you think we do this for? We love people. We love this community. Of course I'll respond and engage with you. That's the very nature of my job.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked a lot about how state government and county government are kind of one and the same, one at the local level, one obviously at the state level. How does that play into, how do you collaborate with your state partners? For example, you have $15 million that came to the county for riverfront development. How do you collaborate with your state partners to make those kind of things happen?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that we think of ourselves as subdivision of the state, at least in this county at this time. We're politically, and I would say much at a deeper level than politically, aligned with a lot of y'all who serve in our area in the delegation, aligned with this governor. And so we're talking about our projects. A lot of times we can tell, we can tell when you're more excited about some things we're working on than others. And there's certainly an opportunity, as we've seen in recent state budgets, that for the state to step in and take things to another level. And where we see alignment, a lot of times I'll call you or other members of the delegation and float our interest in a specific project and make our case for why it's also aligned with the interests of the state of Tennessee. One of the best examples is the large contribution that the state made, thanks frankly, to your leadership at the riverfront. I mean, the Chattanooga riverfront is where the city began. We almost named Chattanooga Ross's Landing. That's how much that part of the river is central to our community even coming into existence. It's the place where the Chattanooga rebirth took place. And then it's also a place that's gotten tired somewhat, and it needs reinvestment. We made that case to the state of Tennessee on a basis of driving tourism, major industry in the state of Tennessee.
But that is a unique investment because the state gave it to the county and not to the city. That's different. I mean, usually my experience has been, if I'm in Shelby County, when you do something that's on the Mississippi River, it usually goes to the city of Memphis.
Right.
This is county government kind of being at the front of the train.
Well, we really care about the project. And so we've been very hands-on with the project. When we came to y'all and asked that the state would participate, we explained that. We even explained that our personal motive and standard in pursuing the revitalization, the renovation of the Chattanooga riverfront is that our own children would want to hang out there. It's a project that just as young parents, the county mayor's office has taken very personally. We're hands-on in that regard. And again, I think we've tried to demonstrate both to our delegation, to other members of the legislature, the governor's office, various departments of state government, that we are earnestly partners. We see ourselves as a subdivision of the state of Tennessee, and asked to be entrusted with the state's commitment there. And I think that's a natural, if you think about what local government, city government, municipal government means in Tennessee and what county government means, it makes sense to me that if the city and county are collaborating on something, you would trust the county to be good stewards of your funds, and that your most direct recourse would also likely be on the county if we didn't do what you wanted.
Yeah. So, what are you enjoying most about your job as mayor? What do you like the most? And the next question is going to be, what do you like the least? What do you like the most?
It's a huge privilege. Even when you go through, seasons where there's more criticism, a lot of people come to me and they'll kind of express a sort of empathy. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I signed up for the job. Huge privilege, particularly as a young parent. My kids are young. I don't know if I'm a young parent anymore, but in this season of life, to be able to be in a leadership role in your community is a huge honor. So I have never lost sight of that. I feel like I have a sense of gratitude coming into the office every day. The speed with which local government moves is incredible. Again, my political education began as a kid in a congressional family where I saw my dad work really hard for many, many years to get a few things done in his own community and then affect a lot of things across the country. But everything we do, 100% of our effort lands back in our county, affecting neighbors, friends. That's naturally very rewarding. And then to be able to address some of the things that have always frustrated you about your hometown, what could be more rewarding? I love Chattanooga, love Hamilton County, now live on Signal Mountain, swapped state senators in the process last year.
Definite upgrade.
But, there's some of the disparities that have existed here, some of the challenges in public education, to be able to go and work on the things and work towards improving the things that you think need to be changed in your communities. Like, I couldn't ask for a more fun thing to do.
If there is anything, you might say, I love everything about it.
No, the least favorite is is probably my least favorite thing about life too, is being misunderstood. I think you get misunderstood or mischaracterized. Like I got a lot of bad qualities. I have bad ideas, but there tends to be, that can snowball, where, somebody didn't like an idea you had, but then that becomes that then comes in coordination maybe with a set of assumptions about who you are and why you're doing things. But earlier out in the hallway, a guy asked me how he could pray for me. And I tell a lot of people who ask that question, in all seriousness, pray that I'm understood. I don't know how that works, but I want to be better understood because some of the things I'm accused of are not right. Now, again, I get a lot of things wrong. I have a lot of bad ideas, and my wife could tell you about a bunch of them. But sometimes the feedback I'm getting is not square with where our heart is.
I like the prayer thing. And I agree. I'll tell you one thing that is incredibly humbling is when people come up to you and tell you that they're praying for you. It will. I mean, it just makes a difference. I mean, and I'm one that believes that prayer makes a difference anyway. But to have another person come up and say to you, "Hey," or text you, or however they do it, tell you, "Hey, I'm praying." There's a whole group in the legislature of folks who have like this prayer circle, and periodically during the course of the year, we'll get a text from them that says, "Someone is praying for you today." And it is powerful.
I'll tell you something similar to that is this is another thing that I'd say surprised me about the job, because I get asked that question a lot. What surprised you? You asked me a variation of that. The amount of affirmative, positive feedback so outweighs the negative. And I've got a theory about how this works, but or why this is. And it's that now in social media culture, a lot of the keyboard warriors, the more negative, angry people, they just communicate their feedback that way because they can, so they don't actually have to confront you. But people are so encouraging, and they have been since I started. Even some of the kind of rocky months in the early part of my service at the grocery store, so to speak, the ratio of people coming up and saying kind, affirming things to negative is like 20-1. And that's not what people think. But a lot of times, again, when people kind of lament, they'll come to me, "Oh, it's so hard to be in elected office. I don't know how anybody does it." One of the things I tell them is, first of all, a huge privilege. You should consider doing it. It's not that bad to be criticized. And also, people are really kind to you, at least to your face. It's been my experience.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think the good in people far outweighs the bad. All right. So by the way, when Claude Ramsey was county mayor, he told me the two things that he did not like about the job. That he said the job would be great if he didn't have to wake up every morning and deal with the jail and Erlanger Hospital. Mm. Well, we've taken one of those off your table. And I think you've got a sheriff now that kind of really does a good job with the jail. So I don't hear as much about the jail anymore as I used to. Maybe you still have to deal with that. But other than that, Claude Ramsey said, job's great. So you kind of reflect that as well.
One thing I'd add to what's awesome about the job that I wouldn't have expected is it fits both those categories. The county has a great culture of retaining and even promoting leadership. So to this day, like I've got an awesome team that works in my office, and a lot of them are more talented than I am. And people who work with us know that. I think it's caused us to earn some trust in different parts of our community.
I would say you learned that from your private sector, right? Because one of the proverbs in private sector is hire people smarter than you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, specifically, Ted Alling taught me very early in my career. His way of talking about it in the logistics business was hire tens, hire people who are really good at what they do. I kind of translated that to be willing to hire people who are better than you. Several people on our staff who are smarter than I am. Some are more creative than I am. Some have more operational expertise than I do. That served me well. But I also inherited a lot of really capable people. And this is a testament to Claude, who hired a lot of them, Coppinger, who hired some of them and retained all of them. But that's actually a big difference even between the county and the city today is how many of our people are tenured and experienced from public works to finance. That's a real privilege. It makes my job easier, but also more rewarding because, I get to focus on things that I want to focus on, knowing that there's people who are going to make sure the trains are running on time.
Yeah. So I was at your kickoff event for your 2026 reelection campaign. And that, the primary is in May?
May.
And the general election is in August?
Yeah, our general election is your primary.
Yeah, so we kind of will be out banging on doors and that kind of stuff together. So I heard your your pitch at your reelection campaign, but now you're interviewing for the job again.
Yeah.
Why do you want to keep doing this?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's a great honor and a great thrill to be able to lead the community, not only where you grew up, but where you're raising your kids. And we've got such a huge advantage on other communities. We've had great leaders who've come before us in this community. We have beautiful geographic advantages, and I feel a responsibility to go steward that. I think we've done a good job blocking and tackling, staying focused on a lot of the things that we said we'd do. When I said I was wanted this job to begin with, that's the highest compliment I ever get is when people stop me and say, "Hey, man, you're actually doing what you said you'd do." That's one that stopped me in my tracks. And so we'll keep doing that. Now I think we've put together a few years of both doing small things well, but then also taking on some big vision items around, we're really fundamentally going to change the footprint of the school system in some parts of the county and already are changing the types of opportunities available to kids. That'll have economic development consequences over the next decade. And so we're to the point now where we're comfortable being judged on our track record. And then I made a decision that some people think is unusual to constrain myself to just doing this for 2 terms. That was a deal, honestly, that I made with Shelby. Shelby, my wife's not very political. I think executives should have term limits. I feel very comfortable with that decision that I made long ago, and it's given us a sense of urgency every day in the county mayor's office because there's certain things we want to do, and we're going to do our best if we're given a second term to get as much as we can, and then turn the keys over to somebody else.
Well, and I have no doubt you'll leave it better than you found it, which is what we all strive to do, whether it's in our local community or it's across the state. We try to leave it better than we found it.
What I have said to people, when people come up to me and they say really kind things, or in the rare case that they say, they've got some criticism, my response is very simple and earnest, and I just tell them we're trying really hard, because we are. Like, we work really hard. We're trying. We're doing our best. I think our best effort has gotten better. We're learning on the job. We've learned from some mistakes. We've learned from some things that have gone well. We've learned a lot from you, candidly, about how state government works, but also just how political collaboration works. And so I think if you think we've done a decent job, I really believe we're getting better. And if I'm given a second term, we'll get even more done.
That's wonderful. Well, this is the first of probably, I have no doubt, some future podcasts. We'll sit down and talk about other issues that are affecting Hamilton County, because you're at the tip of the spear. And it's been great having you here. This has been Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson with today's episode of Tennessee Today. We've been talking with Hamilton County Mayor Weston Wamp. Hey, listen, if you like this show, please hit the subscribe button so that we know that you liked it, and feel free to comment what you think about the show. It's been a great opportunity. Thanks, Weston.
Thank you.